The human race, human beings collectively, humanness, benevolence. Learning or literature concerned with human culture, especially literature, history, art, music, and philosophy. That is what we call humanity. Humanity has many different meanings. As I already said, it can mean Homo sapiens, simple benevolence, or art. But there are more things that also define humanity, our mortality being one of them. Some might say that morals also define humanity. In this video, I want to go through the significance of mortality and how it's a big part of what makes us human. For that, I'm gonna analyze Goetia from part 1 of FGO. He's a character that a lot of people don't understand, reasonably so, which is why I want to cover him. So, let's start. In part 1 of Fate Go, Goetia is the main antagonist, and a really good one at that, if you forget how stupid he was most of the time. First, let's talk about what he is. Goetia, in Fate, is the aggregate form of Solomon's 72 demon gods. Basically, he's a combination of them, which makes him not human. Solomon made him to look after humanity after his death, but didn't tell him how. Even so, he still has feelings and emotions. He hates death and suffering, and hates those who can help but do nothing. So, he took it upon himself to stop all human suffering. That is the gist of him. He was born during Solomon's reign as king, so he has been living for some time. He wasn't meant to become a savior of humankind, just an observer. So think of him as an AI that went rogue. Someone that looks after humanity. And mostly just that. Got all that? Well, there's still more. Before we get into his roles and ideals in Fate, let's first talk about another thing that he is. Beasts are evils of humanity. They are beings that can and want to destroy humanity. Kind of. But there is a fun part. To be a beast, you first need to love humanity. Beasts don't want to end humankind because they hate them, but because they love them. In a way, they are unneeded saviors and paradoxes. Let's go more in depth. Let's take Tiamat. Tiamat is the first beast class entity we encounter, and also likely the weakest one. I won't go into too much of what happens in Singularity 7 where she appears, but I will briefly go over her motivations. Tiamat, in Sumerian myths, is the mother of gods and humanity, and she's, let's just say, a really doting mother. So much so that, in Fate, she supported her children when they wanted to kill her husband. Wild woman. But her children didn't stop there. They also fought and killed her as well. In the actual myths, she wasn't as in love with her children, but in Fate Go, this is how she's portrayed. Again, myths are wild. Either way, even after all of that, even with all her fears, she still loves humanity. The trauma she got from her murder caused her to fear humanity, but deep inside, her love remains. So, she wants to kill humanity for her own survival, because they've already killed her once, and the next generation of quote-unquote humanity. And by kill, I mean turn them into llamas, so she can love them forever and stay by their side. In simpler terms, she wants to take care of humans, always make decisions for them, spoil them like a doting mother. She's a parent scared of what her children might and have become, which is why she does the things she does. And that is where her, what I call, destructive love comes from. Her wants, while understandable, will only doom her children. That is her view of humanity. And that is an example of a beast. Let's get back to Goetia. What sort of destructive love does he have? All beasts have them, so how does his work? What are his views on humanity? As I already said, he sees himself as a messiah, the messiah that Solomon never was. Goetia hates Solomon. He despises how Solomon, even though he had power, never used it for salvation. So, he devised a plan. He would make a world without death, without suffering. But for that, he needed energy, and a lot of it. A human history worth of it. Literally. To gather energy, he decided to burn all of human history, and with it, travel back in time to when the planet was first formed. Now, why go back to that point specifically? Because planets in the Nasuverse are complicated, and I'm not gonna get into them. Once he goes back in time, he can make the perfect humans. But there is one really big problem with that. A problem that he can't even fathom. To do all of that, all of human history has to be erased, which also means that everyone has to die. Goetia sees no problem with this. After all, he's making humanity better, right? As I have already said, Goetia is old, very old. He's lacking something very fundamental to humanity, and that is mortality. Goetia sees himself as above humans, and he thinks that he needs to save them from what he considers to be humanity's misery. Throughout thousands of years, he has seen many humans fall to what is called death, something he has never had to fear, at least not for himself. Death isn't something he understands truly. He just understands that no matter who, no matter how strong or influential, everyone dies. Everyone turns to dust. He turns to what we call the worst view of nihilism. If all these people are gonna die anyway, what's the point in them living? If everything is in a constant cycle, does anything that happens really matter? Goetia has seen the rise and fall of many rulers, kingdoms and empires, again and again and again, countless times. He has seen the same tragedies happen again and again and again, countless times. But if we get rid of death, wouldn't that just get rid of suffering as well? If everyone lived the same as me, wouldn't our lives be worth more? Wouldn't all suffering just disappear? I have already talked a little bit about Solomon, but let's get into more detail and the reasons behind Goetia's hatred of him. Solomon was like an AI that didn't go rogue, the exact opposite of Goetia. Son of David and King of Israel, he was eventually given great wisdom by God and also clairvoyance of past, present, and future, and 10 cool looking things, I guess, all of which gave him powers. Solomon never wanted anything for himself, only wisdom, and lots of wives, I guess. Anyway, with his wisdom, He gave humanity magecraft, which up until then could only be used by gods and similar beings. But that's all he did. Sure, he was a great king, but with that much power and wisdom, shouldn't he have done more? Why did he just sit there and watch as there were people starving, getting murdered, and being abused? That is where Goetia's hatred comes from. Solomon's lack of actions. Solomon eventually died and left Goetia behind. But this is the Nasu verse. People who die can come back as servants. Great people from history that can be summoned as basically ghosts. Most of the time, they are summoned to fight in a Holy Grail war. The war between multiple people for a chance at obtaining the Holy Grail. Solomon, with his master, the one who summoned him, unsurprisingly won. Using the Holy Grail, they could wish for anything, and it would come true. His master wanted money, and he eventually used that money to make Chaldea, the organization we play as in Fate Go. Solomon wasn't sure. This was the first time he had to think about what he wanted. Everything he did for God and others. Everything that he got because of chance. He never really wanted anything, other than one thing. He wanted to be human. Someone without powers or influence. Just a common person. And so, that is what he wished for. To live as a human. But, not everything went as planned. Just as he was turning into a human, he saw a vision. He saw the destruction of humanity, and soon after lost all of his powers. All he was left with was his own humanity, and also a vision of destruction. Solomon soon became a doctor by the name of Romany. He was hired by his then master, now boss, to work for Chaldea. Chaldea was, at least on paper, made to prevent the extinction of humanity, no matter what. Romany saw this as his best chance to prevent the catastrophe he witnessed as his final vision while he was still Solomon. Until then, he lived as a human, laughing, crying, complaining about work, and other things that humans do, all of which he didn't do as Solomon. And he was grateful for this chance to live as a human, to make connections, to make friends. In the game, he's a supporting character that is the butt of a lot of jokes, and while he gets bullied a lot by a lot of characters, he doesn't really mind. He's just happy to be alive, even if he knew the extinction of humanity was coming. One last thing before we get into more detail about Romany and Goetia is that Goetia was a part of Solomon. They were a part of each other ever since Goetia was created. So, when Solomon was ruling over Israel and doing whatever it is that Solomon does, Goetia saw things from the same perspective. They both had the same POV. They witnessed the same things. But while Solomon only did as God intended and nothing more, Goetia was going crazy over Solomon's inactions. Different people, same POV. Like two people seeing a film and each reaching a different conclusion. After Solomon's death, mystery, basically magic, think of it as magic, I'm not going to explain it, it's complicated, started declining rapidly. Because of that, the gods and their divinity all started disappearing, and magecraft and similar phenomena started being hidden from the common man, eventually leading into the modern day where we live, but with a lot of gas leaks. One thing that God told Solomon to do is teleport his 10th ring into the future. God didn't tell him why, just told him to do it. And that ring is what Marisburi, Solomon's master, used to summon Solomon. So God foresaw all of this happening and just planted tiny seeds so that everything would fall into place eventually. Still don't know why he had so many wives though. Throughout the storylines of FGO, Romany is the second most shown character, behind MASH, in part 1. Gritska does nothing, so he's excluded. Now, let's talk about MASH, because she's an important character to both Romany and Goetia. MASH isn't a normal human. She's kind of a homunculus. She was experimented on her whole life. She was made to be possessed by a servant that is later revealed to be Galahad. Because she was created artificially, like a golem, she only has 2 years of life left within her when we first meet her. So 2 years after the start of the game, she would die. For a very long time, only her and Romany know about her lifespan situation. And so does Goetia. MASH is like a daughter to Romany. He feels responsible for the experiments she went through and her situation. And Romany was one of the only people that actually cared about MASH. He cares a lot for her, and it's very apparent. Goetia sees MASH differently. He sees her as the only possible person that can understand his goals. Because MASH can only live for a total of 18 years, she should also fall into the same nihilistic viewpoints as him, right? Well, no. Even though her lifespan is short, she still knows how important endings are. There is no life without death, no beginning without an end. She has a short lifespan, Goetia has all of it. So, even though they are both irregular, they can't share the same viewpoints. The pity Goetia has for humanity is only his own. So, no one else shares the same thoughts about death that he does. In the final singularity, he offers her a spot in the past he's trying to create. But she declines. And so he just kills her. Until she gets revived by Cat Palik after the singularity is over, because she's the mascot character. So, by now you should understand the dynamic between Goetia and Romany. Goetia stayed as an immortal, out-of-reach demon, while Romany chose to become human. It's just really sad that the first 5 to 6 storylines of Fate Go are written so terribly, and that it only becomes good once Camelot starts. But anyway, that's beside the point. Let's get back on topic. In the story, Goetia first pretends to be Solomon, which greatly confuses Romany, and is only later revealed to be Goetia in the last chapter. Actually, same goes with Romany. Romany is only revealed to be Solomon at the end as well. Up until then, the only person who at some point figures out that Romany is Solomon is Da Vinci. So, let's talk about this last part. After going through the 7 singularities, the Chaldeans finally reach Salamon, the grand temple of time where Goetia resides. The Chaldeans slowly go through the 72 demon god pillars, endgame style, and reach Goetia, who at this point is still pretending to be Solomon. One thing I haven't said about beasts is that they all have a Naga skill. For Tiamat, she can create a barrier that only allows living beings inside it, and disables most noble phantasms. So, it kills most servants. King Hassan can go through it because he's beyond life or death, even as a servant. For Goetia, it's an anti-summoning skill. Basically, no servant can fight Goetia when he has this skill, because he can just desummon them, and also disable their abilities and noble phantasms. So, the worst possible opponent for Chaldea that strictly fights by summoning servants. Cool. Even death-related servants wouldn't be able to resist it, so it's even worse than Tiamat's Naga skill. The only person who can fight him is Mash, but he kills Mash soon after his reveal anyway, so how does he get defeated? Well, in the Nasuverse, every rule has an exception. There is one noble phantasm that Goetia can do nothing against, and that he knows exists and even possesses, but doesn't know the true nature of. After Mash dies, Romany appears in front of Ritska and Goetia, to both of their just surprises. He reveals who he is and takes off his gloves. Remember the 10 rings he got from God? Well, Goetia had all of them, except the one Solomon teleported into the future. That ring was still in possession of Romany after Marisburi gave it back to him. With this ring, Romany can use that exception I talked about. While Goetia has all of Solomon's skills, after 3000 years of being in his body, he didn't know about the nature of his first one and why he had it. There is one act that Solomon did that was very human. He returned 9 of his rings to God after he did the things he was supposed to do, and soon after, died. Goetia manifested with the 9 rings, but the remaining one was replaced with a silver one that had no significance. The exception I talked about is called Ars Nova. It can only be used if all 10 rings are in the same place. So, Goetia has 9 of them, and Solomon has the remaining final one. With that, he uses Ars Nova, which returns all of his gifts and powers to God, and erases all traces of him. It doesn't mean that he never existed, it just means that he won't exist anymore, making it so that he can't even be summoned as a servant. Goetia, being one of his gifts, gets significantly weaker, losing his immortality and slowly losing his Naga skill as well. After using Ars Nova, Romany finally realizes why he and Goetia reached different conclusions. Solomon didn't have the right to be mad. He was God's messenger, and that is all he ever was. As I already have said, he's like an AI, and Goetia is an AI that went rogue. It's only once Solomon became Romany that he gained true sentience. After all that, Romany dies, disappearing forever. After Romany's death, Ritska finally fights Goetia for the last time. He finally beats him after doing all that he possibly can. Goetia starts falling apart. Every individual demon god pillar starts doing its own thing. 2 of them even help the servants. Such legends. But anyway, all the pillars start dying, or going insane, then dying. Other than 4 of them, but they aren't important for this video. Goetia just can't fathom why he's losing after all of his 3000 years long preparations. While still fighting until his last breath, he finally asks Ritska why he's going against his plans, why he refuses to see the bigger picture. And Ritska answers, to live, not to save humanity or fight for it, but to live. It finally clicks with For all of his life, he never saw humans as individuals, but as a collective. What he saw was all humans dying eventually, no matter what, but not the lives those individual humans lived. He saw them like himself, a collective of many parts, like how he, himself, is made of the 72 demon god pillars. But unlike Goetia, humans are not a collective. They make relationships, form bonds, but they are all different. And unlike Goetia, they are mortal. No one truly wants to die. People just want to be free. But going back in time to make the perfect Homo sapiens doesn't accomplish anything. For that to happen, everyone that has lived, is living, and will live would disappear. Goetia's plan was doomed for failure because he didn't have something fundamental to humanity, and that's mortality. He couldn't save humans for two reasons. One, they don't need to be saved, and two, he never understood human nature. He only focused on the suffering, not the hope. He embraced the worst view one can have on nihilism. In the end, he finally gets it. He understands how pointless his goals were. As Gilgamesh puts it, the threat to humanity truly rises from the very wish to protect it. After all, you only need a gallon of gasoline and a chisel of hearts to burn the world. After that, he finally becomes mortal and confronts Ritsuko as he is fleeing the collapsing temple. At this point, Goetia finally has humanity. He knows that fist-fighting Ritsuko leads to nothing. He knows that it is pointless. But now, he has a personal reason, and that is pride. He has to do this, not for any big ideal, but for the sake of living and dying while knowing true mortality. Tragically short, yet fascinating. That is what his human life amounted to. Ritsuko also understands him. He tells him that at this point, he would also start fist fighting if he was Goetia. They fight with no one around for a while, and Goetia slowly starts fading. And after this, he finally dies. In part 2 of Fate Go, Cosmos in Lost Belt, we hear of someone calling themselves the Chaldean. This person gets hyped up until Lost Belt 5, where he finally appears. He looks just like Romany, but it's not him. Most likely, he's Goetia. Ars Nova only erased Solomon and Romany, but not Goetia. They are two different entities. This Romany looking person is pretty angsty, so again, most likely Goetia, but for sure not Romany. At this point, nothing about him is confirmed, so we can only speculate. In the end though, not counting whoever the Chaldean is, Goetia failed, miserably. There is a theory that he decided to put his plans into action when he did, because he knew that the alien god was gonna show up and bleach the earth, destroying humanity. You know, the main antagonist of part 2. This statement will most likely not age well, but I don't know if it's true. It does make sense, and it's pretty cool, so I choose to believe it. At first, this video was meant to be about multiple views of humanity, but that didn't work out. I didn't expect to go so deep into Goetia and Romany's characters. I probably forgot some things, but who cares? Hopefully this video was entertaining. Also, please, for the love of God, redeem it in full, it's so golden!